We should rename this podcast to "Will Realtors Still Have a Job?"
Look, I get it. The Toronto real estate market is confusing. Whether you're a new or experienced investor or just looking for a home to raise your family in, join us at Broadview Table Talks as you sit around the table with my friends and talk about the real estate and the ever-changing market in Toronto.
All right, so what are we talking about this time?
So there's some articles that came up on open bidding.
Yes.
So
what is that?
ideally, I would like you to just start with that, open bidding, and just explain what that is to me, to the viewers, and then what we have in Canada, which we don't have open bidding right now, or as of now at least.
Okay, so basically the Trudeau government was pushing for open bidding when, if you remember, not too long ago, before these interest rate hikes, prices were getting out of whack. They were getting crazy. All of a sudden, you had like 20 bids, 30, 40 bids on a property because of scarcity, right? Now, we all know that if we're allowing over 1 million people to come into Canada and we're only building 250,000 homes, that's only a quarter of the homes for the amount of people we have. So if you say 2.6 people per household, you still need like 500,000 homes. 500,000 homes to meet the quality. So we're basically underbuilding by half the amount that we should be building. That's just a general number, right? So we should be building double. So of course, based on basic economics, when supply doesn't meet the demand, the price goes up. So that's what's happening. Price goes up, and as the price goes up, how do you administer that when you're selling a home as a seller?
Right.
You have an auction. Right. So that's what's happening, and people are complaining, saying, "I want it more fair. I want more transparency. I want more openness when you're doing bidding. I want to know what the previous person bid against." So imagine you're in a bid, and you're competing to buy a home with somebody else. You don't know what they offered, so you throw in a number. How do you know that number is the right amount?
So in Canada, we call that's blind bidding.
Right. Closed bidding, or it's like, well, it's not
Closed
in Canada, it's anywhere.
Yeah.
It's like if you think of a Sotheby's auction or something, right, where you're putting a blind bid, you put a paddle up and you know how much the next person said because they just said it out loud. Or in Australia, where they're literally physically in front of a lawn putting up the bids, right, and saying, "I'll pay $1 million, I'll pay $1.2 million, I'll pay $1.5 million, I'll pay sold." You know what I mean? Like that actually happens. So that's what people want here. Now, as a seller, that's not fair for the seller. If I'm selling, I don't want open bid. I want closed bid because I want people to overpay by 80 grand, 100 grand.
Or I want to see what people think is their version of what's fair.
Right, or what it's worth, right? The problem is the public is not appraisers, so it's hard for them to, they're not certified appraisers. They have their advice of a realtor if they're represented, which should give them the proper advice of how much they should pay. But
for sure.
It's all a subjective thing, and appraisers are important because that's what banks lend on, based on appraised values.
Of course. Because
that's what it is. So, yes, as a seller, you could benefit by somebody overpaying. But as a buyer, which is the majority of the population right now because we're in a housing shortage, is that they're overpaying and they're upset about it.
And they feel like they want to open up the process and make it more transparent for them.
Right. So in Ontario, the new legislation coming in December 1st, 2023, which they finally acted on based on, I guess, what the federal government was pushing for, is called the Trust in Real Estate Services Act, which replaces the Real Estate Council of Ontario, or the REBA 2000. So Real Estate Business and Business Brokers Act. That's what it stands for. So now it's going to be called TRESA, and within that TRESA, the sellers have options to list it on an open bidding platform or a closed bidding platform. Nice. Closed bidding, we all know that's what we've been doing for the past forever, basically. But open bidding, there's new online sites that allow you to bid as if you're buying something on eBay. Where it shows you the last bid. Right? Or actually, does it show you? Actually, I think in eBay you have the option to do closed bid or open bid too, right?
You do.
With a reserve price. But imagine it's all open. You see the history of bids and buyer A, buyer B. Maybe you won't see their names, but you'll see the prices. And some of these sites already exist right now.
Yes, they do.
And, I thought at first that no sellers going to want to do this, so the general public won't adopt it. But there's a lot of things that change with our industry, in our world, even when you have more people, right? Like things just change. Like one thing that's constant is that everything's going to change always. Right. So I think there's going to be a pressure for sellers to use open bidding process, like an open bidding process, because if you're a buyer and you're competing, if you're a seller and you're competing with a few other homes in the area, in that market, and you want to sell your home for whatever need that you need to sell for, and there's one that has an open bidding process versus one that has a closed bidding process, the buyers will probably opt for the open bidding process one.
You want to go with the bigger pool of prospects, I guess.
Right. So I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I think it's going to take time for this to happen. But I think the general perception may change to open bidding process, like as a standard.
Yeah.
So what is the reason to changing this process? Is it more so just built on transparency alone? Is it because a lot of people complain? Or do you think it might be because it might be a tool to cool down the prices as well? Because since everybody can see it,
Well, for sure.
it doesn't rise up so much. You don't have one person having FOMO and being like, I'm going to offer 1.6 on this $1 million property, right? Because they have a fear of missing out, like what it was last summer.
Right. And we'll get back to those days for sure. Just because, again, the amount of immigration we're letting in for the amount of supplies, the housing that we're building, and we can't build more because of labor costs, materials, et cetera, labor shortages.
Sorry, just my 2 cents. It's like, it's not going to stop that one person from seeing how much the last bidder put in and saying, you know what, I really want this house. I'm just going to throw an extra $50,000 at it.
But it may not be 100,000 more or X amount more. It may not be
right.
more. So
That's
yes,
what I meant by the FOMO.
So to answer your question, Neil, yes, it's all of the above, which will stop. The transparency will bring down prices, I think, or at least a rise in prices. It will, it'll give more transparency, which is a good thing for the buyer, not so much for the seller. Again, as a seller, I want that accidents to happen. I want those things to happen. And then what happens is that now all of a sudden you said new bar, so that when the next house sells, that kind of compares that one, like they're using that as a platform,
right?
Generally. But there's cases where I see where there's one that just went way over, and then the next one sells a little bit under because no one else is willing to pay for that, right? And then it kind of goes back to where it normally was.
So it kind of shows you someone who just kind of went a little bit nutty,
right? And then people just kind of ignore that. And they don't use that as an appraisal anymore, right? Yeah. So I don't know where it's going to go. I just think that there might be a chance that we all move to an open bidding society. Who knows? Yeah. I mean, again, good for the buyer, bad for the seller. One other thing that I'm seeing in the States, and if you guys are unaware of what's happening, is the NAR lawsuit, right? There's a class action lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors, the NAR, which is it's like our CREA, Canadian Real Estate Association, a federal governing body that all the little MLSs report to. In the States, they are saying that buyer commissions shouldn't be paid for by the sellers, right? And they're actually making a lot of progress. There's at least, I think, 3 local state MLSs that are now not requiring sellers to pay a commission to the buyer's agents. So that unlocks a lot of issues, as you can imagine, right? So for us as real estate professionals, if we're representing a buyer, the buyer is going to be paying our fee as opposed to the seller paying our fee. And that generally could be 2.5%. In the States, it's 3%, right? Generally. Yeah. And that could be a lot for somebody to cough up, especially if they don't have the funding, right? So there's a bunch of arguments back and forth about why that should be existing and why that shouldn't be existing. So for those 3 states, those MLSs that don't require fees anymore, like even if you require a fee, they don't mandate how much of a fee that is. So all the other 49 states or whatever that have their own MLSs, or all the other MLSs out there, I don't know how many they have, they still require a cooperating commission, like a buyer's agent's commission, for the seller to pay for that. Right. But it could be $1, it could be a penny. It just has to be something. Right. So for those 3 states, it's not existing anymore, which could, again, pave the way for a part where the seller doesn't pay the commission anymore, which could cause a problem for our industry.
Of course.
Because now we have to ask the buyers pay for it, and they may not qualify for it, so there may be less transactions. There may be more direct to consumers. There may be more issues with unrepresented buyers, which means that they could potentially be misled and pay too much, maybe. And then it also brings up the prices. I don't know what's going to happen. I know there's going to be change.
So
right?
the Redditors are winning. They're taking down all the real estate agents.
Like the thing is, I mean, just because you're allowing them to not have a commission, I think it'd be anti-competitive to not offer a commission, right? If you're working with real estate professionals that in our current market are still paid by the seller, there's price steering. You know, it's just like as a matter of, it's illegal to steer someone to buy something. Like if I'm representing a buyer, I'm not allowed to push somebody to buy something that is paying a higher commission than somebody that's not paying a commission or a commission at all. Right? That's illegal. But we all know in practice that human nature takes over and it just happens. Whether I don't do it, you guys don't do it, but someone else might do it. Right? So I think it's anti-competitive. We all know the facts. We know what's right and wrong. The fact is you should offer a commission out because ultimately those guys are working hard. And the argument is that those guys are working hard to sell your property as a seller. So why is that illegal?
They're bringing you someone to buy
That's
the property.
right. So
Yeah.
I think personally that the seller should be paying the commission, right? And generally, it works out to, at least in Ontario, if you're or in Toronto even, if you're paying land transfer taxes and closing costs and all that, you're probably paying about 5% anyway. So on the buyer side, when you're buying a home, you're paying 5%,
Yeah.
right? When you're selling, you're paying 5%,
Yeah.
generally as a commission, right? 2.5 to the seller and 2.5 to the buyer side. That's our kind of our industry average. There's no average, there's no set commission, but that's generally what's going on in the public right now.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of makes sense. Whether you're transacting on either side, you're paying 5%.
Yeah.
Now imagine if that shifted all that on the buyer side. And instead of 5, it's 2.5% and then 7.5%.
Then the seller actually walks away with more. With
Well,
more of
essentially,
what the sale
right?
price is, yeah.
Essentially, I mean, that's the thing, right? They're not going to take a discount on the prices. They're not going to bring down the price. I don't think it will anyway.
I don't think it will.
Because the seller's going to be like, oh, that guy got $1 million. I want $1 million. Or I want $1.1 million.
And
You
I
know what
pay
mean?
less in commission.
And I pay less. So I think it's a non-issue to me, but a lot of people in the States are all up in arms about it because it potentially could shift the way they do business as real estate professionals. So 2 major things hitting our industry that I think in our North American real estate practice, which of course they're all made up by local MLSs, so there's no like North American real estate board or anything like that. But it's just, I think the way we're doing business is definitely going to change with the onset of AI and technology and online businesses and open bidding and the buyer agent commission issue. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. Also, I guess they're just making a lot more rules. For example, in Australia, there's so many rules on protecting these buyers. So, as along with the open bidding process, the agents can't double end deals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually coming in TRESA as well, too, in the
Really?
Trust and Real Estate Services Act. You're not allowed to represent both sides anymore. Sorry. Actually, I don't know if you're allowed to. Sorry.
There might be some loops that you need to go through for it.
No, what you're definitely not, I have to revisit the rules, but what you're definitely not allowed to do is customer service. So if you have a listing and you contain the full, so when you're taking a listing commission, you're taking an amount you agree with a seller, right?
Yeah.
Generally, let's say it's 5%, okay?
Yeah.
That 5% actually belongs to you as a listing agent or listing brokerage, I should say, because you split within your brokerage, blah, blah, blah. If you just so happen to split it with a buyer's agent, which most of the times that does happen, then you split half of them or whatever that percentage is, 2.5% out to the buyer side.
Yes.
If there is no buyer's agent, you probably get to keep that. Actually, technically, you get to keep that unless you negotiate something else, which oftentimes it happens.
Yes.
Now, TRESA is not allowing customer service anymore. So a buyer to your property has to be represented or they have to be self-represented.
Right.
They can't be represented by you as a listing agent through a customer service agreement. And what's the difference between client service and customer service? Anybody know?
Customer service, you're just pushing the transaction through with the paperwork.
Honesty, fairness, openness, things like that.
Yeah. No fiduciary duties.
But no fiduciary duties.
Yep.
So you don't have to tell them what it's worth. You don't have to tell what your opinion is.
Yep.
Right? You just say, okay, no problem. Honest and fair. I'm not lying to you. I'm not misleading you. But
Facts
do what you
only.
want. Here's the facts. Right? So they're getting rid of that. Now you have to be represented by a buyer's agent or a seller's agent.
Right. Or yourself.
Or self-represented and do it yourself. Right?
So then
Get
even
to
if
code.
your agreement still says that 5%, now like that 2.5, that other half goes straight to the seller or goes back to the
Well,
seller's
it's the same thing.
pocket?
Nothing in that actually changes
Oh, okay.
because it just has to be, if you're bringing a cooperating agent, you're cooperating with another agent, which you have to specify ahead of time on the MLS statement, which we haven't adopted those NAR rules, like the US rules yet, where we have to, at least in Toronto, offer at least a penny for commission.
Okay.
Okay, so, but that has to be indicated on the MLS. And I personally think it's anti-competitive to offer less than 2.5%, but you're welcome to do so if the seller so directs you to, or you wish to do so as a business practice. But again, you're not being very competitive. You're not going to draw in buyers because of that, or buyers agents because of that. So I think it's a bad practice.
Okay. We should rename this podcast to, will realtors still have a job?
There's a lot of people gunning for us to not, they don't like realtors. They don't like landlords.
They don't see the
like
value
the
that we
government.
bring. They don't see the value that we bring.
Well, it depends. A lot of people online don't see the government. The keyboard warriors don't see the value in real estate agents. But there's a lot of people that are clients, for example, that do trust us, that do see the value of real estate agents. It really depends.
Yeah.
It really depends.
I quickly want to mention in Australia for their open bidding process, it seems like they're fine. Like it doesn't. They say that it doesn't really affect the price too much. At the end of the day, the market's the one speaks for itself, right?
I think there's a case where I forgot what the article says, a couple of articles, but they say that it actually encourages higher prices when you do open bidding, because then it creates this FOMO situation. And how do you know the buyers you're competing with are actually verified? There's nothing in the legislation to say that those are true buyers, right? So like I can get you're not supposed to, I guess, phantom bidding, I think is what it's called. But like, how do you know that somebody actually isn't offering with a condition with a higher price that you're competing against?
Yeah, that's true.
How do you know it's unconditional offers? How do you know it's a bona fide true buyer, right? That actually has the intention of closing, or they're not just driving up the prices. You can't enforce that. You can't police everything. At the end of the day, as a buyer, you have to be informed enough, and your representative has to be informed enough to inform you on whether or not this meets your needs. It doesn't have to be a good deal, because you might want to overpay for it just to get that property, right? And that might be very well fine, because your end goal is to get that property, and that's the fiduciary duty, right?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna tie into it. Like, no matter what restrictions and like hoops that we gotta like that's being created here, like all that matters is that you have a good representative, and there is value in it. There's value in it.
So I think as a realtor, you have to have super thick skin, ignore those people online that hate us and don't see the value in us, think we get paid too much for what we do,
Right.
which I don't disagree, but ultimately because we're providing value.
Yeah.
A little twist of the tongue can earn you tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And you have to have experience for that. And it's a serious game.
Yeah.
It's a serious game. It's not even a game, it's a profession, I should say.
Yeah.
The other thing I saw in New Zealand, I don't know if it's New Zealand or Australia, where they have something against policies against misleading advertising.
Oh,
So
that's New Zealand.
oftentimes, is it New Zealand? Yeah. So oftentimes you have $1 million home, right? But they truly want it 1.5, or let's say like the condo, they list it for $599, but they truly want $750,000. If you get a bid for $600,000, you have to take that bid. I think in New Zealand, or you get fined or something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're not allowed to put it like really low there.
Yeah.
Kind of like here with our super low offer nights.
$1.
Yeah.
See, that's something I could get on board with. I mean, especially for properties that don't have a lot of comparables, it's hard to figure out where to start.
I mean, it happens a lot in commercial real estate, right? Where you're buying, there's not a lot of transactions where you have like a 50-acre parcel and, you know, really hot areas, say, right? Something like that. They're going to list it for $1 because they don't want to give the price away of what they're like. Whoever positions loses, right? That's like
Right.
Chris Voss 101, right? Like, Never Split the Difference. That book's a great book.
Yeah.
But if you position, you tell them how much you want,
Yeah.
then they're going to negotiate against that price.
Right.
But if you don't say anything, let the other person position,
Yeah.
how do you know they're not going to go higher and you negotiate on that price?
Right.
You know what I mean? So, like, that's a good strategy in commercial real estate, and that happens a lot. And it's starting to happen in the residential, but they don't do $1. They do $5.99, $9.99.
4 properties in Toronto are
$1.99.
$1 right now.
Well, yeah, it's like for residential, I always advise our sellers to not do that because the problem is when you're doing searches, you kind of eliminate the lower one. So say you're looking for an $800,000 condo.
Yeah.
You're going to search from 7 to 850.
Yeah.
And you're going to exclude all the $1 ones because there's so much junk underneath 700,000 for if you're looking for 800,000
For
condo.
sure.
You don't want a 500,000 condo.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a lot of them,
Yeah.
right? So that's what I mean.
Yeah. But that's where we bring in our value because we're informed about that.
Well, an astute person would know what the value of a good real estate agent is. And they always say a good real estate agent or a good representative is worth their weight in gold. Like, I know that if I am a sports star, say, like, I see the value of an agent to represent you, right, to get you a higher contract.
Yeah.
Or a car salesman. If I want to sell my car, I'm never selling cars because you don't have to sell Tesla. But if I did, right, if I did, I'd give it to somebody that represents me. And I'm willing to pay their fee.
Yeah.
Everybody has to make money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? I'm willing to work with mortgage brokers because I believe they should be paid for finding me a good deal or a product that meets my needs because my situation is very different than everybody else's, right? And your situation is very different than everyone else's. Like your situation is very different than everyone else's. So like I'm willing to pay my insurance agent to get me a good insurance policy, life insurance policy for something that meets my needs, specific tailored to my needs. Financial advisors, et cetera, et cetera.
Accountants.
Accountants.
Yeah.
They should all
Anyone
get paid
who's
their
providing
fees.
a service.
Lawyers, whatever.
Yeah.
We all gotta make money at the end of the day. You can't do it yourself.
Yeah.
You can do certain things yourself, but you can't do everything yourself.
Right. For sure.
So anyway, that's that. If you have any more questions about changes in the real estate market, stay tuned to this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and follow, and all that kind of fun stuff. What else do you want to add to it before we go?
That's it. Keep my job.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.
Add it up. Thanks for sticking out to the very end. I hope you got some value out of this. Do me a favor, please press like and subscribe. But more than anything, leave me some feedback so we know what to produce for you going forward. Thanks again.